to the Times of Israel's daily briefing. Today's Tuesday, November 11th, day 767 of the war. I'm your host, Amanda Borschel-Dan, here with our military correspondent, Emanuel Fabian, and our Jewish world reporter, Zev Stub. Thank you so much for joining me, both of you gentlemen.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Hi, Amanda.
Zev is going to tell us all about a controversy surrounding plum leadership roles following elections in the World Zionist Congress. Now, these men are going to be in control of billions in funding, so we'll hear more. But first, we'll learn about accusations of failures in the IDF's internal probes into its failure on and leading up to the October 7th Hamas massacre of 1,200 in southern Israel. We'll also get some updates on the uptick of IDF intervention in southern Lebanon. So all of this and more when we're back.
I always say, if there's one thing we need to do really well, it's delight the customer. Our goal is for everything we do to quietly fade into the background so the customer simply thinks, wow, that was really easy. What's made this journey so meaningful is the ongoing challenge of delivering personal connection and thoughtful, tailored service in a virtual world. And especially now, that connection feels more important than ever. We're one nation, one family. When we heard about Hayalim getting engaged and planning quick weddings, we knew we wanted to help, so we gifted them beautiful ketubas, a small but heartfelt thank you for their courage, their protection, and all they're doing for Am Yisrael. We hear it all the time. People are saying, this is the best company I've ever worked with. And honestly, that comes down to one thing: the care each team member puts into every single order.
I'm Amanda Borschel-Dan, here with our military correspondent, Emanuel Fabian, and Jewish world reporter, Zev Stub. First, some updates. As we record, thousands of Israelis are participating in the Kfar Saba funeral of Hadar Golden, who is the slain soldier whose body was handed over to Israel on Sunday, 11 years after his killing and abduction in the Gaza Strip. Also, following his landmark visit to the White House, Syrian President Ahmed al-Sharaa threw cold water on the prospect of Syria joining the Abraham Accords. We are going to hear more about this later in the week. Manny, let's turn to you. And in an indication of the uptick of events along Israel's northern border, the IDF announced that its troops had conducted an overnight raid in southern Lebanon. So give us a sense of how far, for example, into Lebanon the IDF ground troops are operating at this point.
So the IDF is deployed to 5 locations in southern Lebanon. It has been since the November 2024 ceasefire, but it has also carried out ground operations outside of those positions, so sometimes going a kilometer inside Lebanese territory, sometimes slightly more. And this overnight raid in the Hula area, the army demolished several buildings that it says were used by Hezbollah. And this follows a different raid about a month ago where troops raided those buildings and located weapons that were being stored by Hezbollah. Their explosive devices and other materials, they were sort of seized and then destroyed. And then the army went back in again to actually demolish the buildings that were used because they couldn't do it in that initial raid.
So UNIFIL is meant to be doing some of this, and also the Lebanese army itself. So what's happening here? Why is there such a vacuum here?
The Lebanese army is working, and Israel sort of knows this, but they're not working, I would say, up to the speed that Israel wants. And that's why we've seen, in recent weeks, a significant uptick in the amount of strikes being conducted in Lebanon. I will say that most of the strikes that we see are being sort of against people, against members of Hezbollah, and less against infrastructure. Because the infrastructure, Israel can notify this mechanism that's led by the US, and then the Lebanese army will go and handle the site. But for instance, yesterday we saw a wave of strikes in southern Lebanon, in the eastern Bekaa Valley, in the Nabatea area, which is also in South Lebanon, against Hezbollah infrastructure sites where rocket launchers were stored or where precision missiles were manufactured. These are, of course, infrastructure sites, areas that the Lebanese army hasn't dealt with properly. And this normally comes after Israel complains to the mechanism and the Lebanese army doesn't really get its act together and operate against them. And the buildings on the border, which, last night where the army raided and destroyed, in some cases, Israel prefers to act against it itself because of the proximity to the border, and there's areas where the Lebanese army doesn't actually operate in close to Israel's border because it's areas that the army is sort of in control of. I think that's more of a technicality there, but Israel hopes that in the future that the Lebanese army will be operating at a much faster pace to get rid of all these infrastructure sites belonging to Hezbollah in South Lebanon and in all areas of Lebanon.
I mean, all eyes are right now, all eyes in Israel are on the northern border. And I guess the looming question is, and one that I asked with our diplomatic correspondent, Lisa Behrman, on Friday, the question is, are we heading to another, real operation, another little mini war along the border? What are you seeing, Manny?
I think the IDF is ready for what they call days of fighting, which is if there's some sort of miscalculation by Hezbollah, if they launch an attack and a response against Israel's strikes on it, which of course Israel's striking violations of the ceasefire. It's not striking Hezbollah because it just feels like it. Then I think we may see Israel be sort of dragged into some sort of escalation. It probably, at least the army expects something like that to last several days, maybe a week, but not longer. We're not talking about the major ground offensive that we saw last year, which lasted for months, or the major airstrikes that were conducted over months and months of the war. We're not going to see something like that, but Israel is preparing for some sort of deterioration in the situation in Lebanon, which would lead it into days of fighting, but not something that can't be solved within a few days.
So yesterday, you and a slew of military correspondents were called to a briefing in which you heard that most of the IDF's top-tier investigations into its failures on and ahead of Hamas's October 7, 2023 onslaught were inadequate. You and I have been covering many of these probes over the past 2 years of daily briefings. And the October 7th investigations were led by former Chief of Staff Herzi Halevi. In one of his first decisions upon entering the role in March, Zamir, who is the new Chief of Staff, appointed an external panel to examine the probes, which were, of course, examining the failures. And so I just have to ask, before we delve into the findings, do you think that this announcement is some kind of political announcement, meaning it's Zamir trying to make his mark on the October 7th probes, or are the findings really suspect?
I don't think it's something political. I think it's really important, these investigations, because of the fact that nobody else is investigating. I'll say it in different words. The IDF is the only one that's actually launched investigations into October 7th. The Shin Bet did investigate itself, but it really only published very partial pieces of their investigation. The police, I don't even know where they are with their investigation. Apparently they started, they haven't published anything. And of course, the government is not appointing any commission of inquiry of any kind to investigate. So it really just leaves the army. And because of that, the weight that the army's probes are given are sort of a lot more. And therefore, Zamir felt that upon entering the role, he can't just take all of these probes at face value. And in order to actually implement the recommendations of the original probes, they will need to be reviewed and put together in sort of integrated together to actually get useful sort of recommendations from them. And that's why he appointed Major General Sami Turjaman. He's the former commander of the Southern Command, retired from the military years ago, so not involved in any of these failures. His team made up of several senior officers, among them former Navy Chief Eli Sharvit and former Air Force Chief Amikam Norkin, and several other senior officers. And they together basically took all of the investigations, the top level ones, and went through them to see if they sort of are up to the standards of a military investigation. Are they missing anything? Are there any questions that they didn't ask? Are there people that they didn't investigate that they should have done within the scope of the investigation. And they found that, they reviewed 24 of these top-level investigations. And in addition, they also looked at one tactical investigation, the battle or the massacre and the attack at the Nova Festival, mainly for context, but also because it's a very large probe, and it was important for them to also review that. And they gave each one a score, but they also gave each one a full review, essentially, with what was good, what was bad, what they need to add to it. So there are 9 of these probes which are considered to be good or green. They listed them as, which means that whatever they wrote in these investigations, it doesn't mean that the unit that was investigated was good. It means that the investigation was good, and whatever they investigated and whatever they wrote in their summary and in their findings and their recommendations, those are findings that the army should implement within itself and start using. There are another 9 which are orange, which, according to Turjuman's team, they need various additions. They didn't question one person. They forgot to look into one sort of topic within whatever they were investigating. They need to add various things, and it's not the end of the world. The investigations have a strong foundation to them, but they are currently inadequate, meaning the army can't use the recommendations from them because they're not completed. So they will be undergoing various additions. And then the last category is the red ones. There's 5 which are considered unsatisfactory, meaning they will need to be reinvestigated or undergo some major changes in order to actually use their recommendations. And again, this doesn't mean that the unit that was investigated was bad on October 7th. It could mean that they did well, but their investigation was bad. For example, the Navy's investigation, it provides a very detailed account of what happened. It's very accurate. The problem with the investigation is that it has no findings and conclusions in it, and you can't implement anything from that if there aren't any. So they're going to have to redo it and actually make findings and conclusions to actually implement in the army. So that's why it's red. The Operations Division's investigation as well, it was problematic from 2 parts. One is the officer who did the investigation was relatively junior, and Turjuman's team felt that he wasn't really up for the job to investigate this huge thing, and therefore they recommend redoing it with someone more senior. And another part is that the Operations Division investigation begins at 6:29 a.m. on October 7th, meaning as the onslaught began, and it didn't look at anything prior, any of the previous processes and how they were prepared and what they did. None of that's investigated, so there's another commander who's now been appointed to look into that. And the other ones are very similar. Either the commander wasn't experienced enough for the investigation, or it's missing very key questions or key parts that they think should have been included. I'll add one more thing that Turjuman's team found is that there are several topics that weren't investigated at all, and should have been as part of the investigations, which is a very interesting thing that I didn't even think of at the time. And they note a few things. One is the Jericho's Walls plan, the intelligence reports that Israel got regarding Hamas's intention to launch a wide-scale attack on Israel. It's mentioned in some of the probes, but there's been no specific investigation looking into why these intelligence reports were ignored and dismissed over the years and what exactly happened. They're looking into it deeper. COGAT, the defense ministry body responsible for liaison with the Palestinians, the work permits of Gazans who entered Israel, COGAT haven't really, as far as we understand, hasn't conducted an investigation into October 7th, and it probably should do. So that's another one of these topics that just weren't looked at all. And Turjuman's team is now bringing that up to Zamir, and hopefully they'll move forward with that.
Just to clarify, until now, the probes that we've been talking about and publicizing on our website, they were all conducted internally, meaning from people who are currently in the IDF. And now we have an external probe of somebody who is no longer in the IDF, Turjuman, who is giving a different perspective, a more holistic perspective, and weighing in on the efficacy of some of these probes.
Correct. All of the previous ones were internal. In some cases, they brought a reserve officer who had, most recently served in the unit to investigate, but it was mainly by officers in those units that were investigating. Previous Chief of Staff Herzi Halevi tried to appoint an external sort of probe to look into Halevi himself, but the political level didn't really like that because they thought it would criticize them as well, so that was scrapped. But Zamir managed to appoint this sort of panel that looked into the probes themselves and looked at all of them together, like you said, in a more holistic view, to actually get a sort of a wider picture of what exactly happened. And in addition to everything we just said on what the probes were, their quality and what wasn't investigated, the Turjuman team also provided a list of, the failures on October 7th, looking at all the probes together, and they list 6 main reasons, what went wrong and why exactly Israel failed, and it's, a whole long thing. And this 140-page document that they wrote up goes into every single part of the military, the Air Force, the Navy, the Operations Division, the intelligence, what each one failed, what went wrong in each case, in each unit. We won't obviously get into it now because we've heard a lot of this before already. But that is essentially what this document has brought forward. And what Zamir is saying is that this is sort of something that can help bring the army forward. They'll be able to now implement these changes and learn. But there will need to be a sort of an all-encompassing external investigation. He didn't say state commission of inquiry. He didn't say state. He said external commission of inquiry that will be able to investigate things like the relationship between the IDF and the political level, or the relationship between the IDF and the police and the Shin Bet, which were things that weren't investigated, or sort of what level of impact the political level had on the army's plans. Of course, Israel, the IDF is not investigating those things as of now because of pressure from the political level not to investigate it. But that is something that he supports. He didn't say state because it's controversial apparently, but some sort of external investigation.
Okay, Mandy, really fascinating. I'm sure we're going to discuss this further in future episodes. Now, just a few hours after we recorded on Sunday, the daily briefing, we heard that Itai Ophir will indeed become the military advocate general later this month. So just tell us very briefly what we know about the process of having him installed in the end.
So Ophir will enter the role at the end of the month. I think November 24th is what Defense Minister Israel Katz has decided. He will be promoted to Major General, which, of course, is quite unusual in this case because he's a captain in the reserves. He'll be promoted by 5 ranks. And Defense Minister Israel Katz ratified his appointment, which comes after reported objections by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his son against the appointment of Itai Ophir to the role. But it's essentially a done deal now. Katz has signed off on it. And the process is already underway. The IDF might appoint an acting military advocate general over the next couple weeks, just for all sorts of legal business that the unit deals with normally and currently nobody is dealing with. But otherwise, he will enter the role at the end of the month.
Okay, thank you, Manny. I know you have such a busy day, so I'm going to say goodbye and we'll go to a short break.
Thank you.
On October 7, I was here at the Nova Music Festival. I ran for my life, hid for 7 hours. Terrorists shot me twice. Thankfully, I survived. I'm still dealing with trauma, and I'm not alone. 3 million Israelis are in trauma. They need mental health care or physical rehabilitation. Wounded soldiers, families, and scared children.
Since 1912, Hadassah has been a life-changing force in Israel. Today, Hadassah has 2 world-renowned hospitals, pioneers breakthrough medical research, cares for youth, and has built the much-needed and largest rehabilitation facility in Jerusalem.
Thank you to everyone at Hadassah Hospitals. You've been helping me, and so many others. And a special thanks to one nurse, my mom. I love you.
And we're back. I'm Amanda Borschel-Dan here with our Jewish World reporter, Zev Stub. So, listeners, we are going to step into a super complicated saga about the World Zionist Congress elections and the resulting power play afterwards that affects who controls really billions in funds. So, the cast of potential players involves politicians and at least some family members of politicians and already established Jewish lay leaders. So, Zev, I'm going to ask you to set the stage for us so we can kind of understand what's going on here.
Okay, thanks, Amanda. I've been working to kind of simplify this as much as possible so people can understand it, because it is complicated. So every 5 years, a new set of leaders is chosen for what's called the Zionist institutions. That's a group of organizations that includes the World Zionist Organization, Keren Kayemet L'Yisrael, Keren HaYesod, and a few others that work together to strengthen Israel and the Jewish people together. These positions come with kind of a lot of power. They collectively command budgets of more than $1 billion a year to be used for Jewish causes as they see fit. These are organizations that play a key role in promoting Jewish immigration, education, and many more, activities that go on in Israel. Usually, the selection of these leaders at the World Zionist Congress isn't very noteworthy. Most Israeli media outlets don't even cover it. But this year, there were a number of scandals that have kind of made it a juicy story.
Let me just jump in and say that along the way, Zev, you actually were on the podcast with my co-host Jessica Steinberg several months ago talking about the election scandals, and there are all sorts of things happening here. And so I'm going to put links in the program notes so people can catch up here. And then, yes, let's jump to the end of this very long and very complicated saga, or at least the middle. We don't know if it's the end yet, right, Zev?
Right. The election saga was really dramatic, a lot of fraud, a lot of things going on. But I was notified in the past hour that a final decision has been made regarding one of the positions in question, the position of the WZO chairman. So I'm just going to let you know, the current chairman, Yaakov Chagowel, is going to split that position with Rabbi Doron Peretz, who's the current chairman of the religious Zionist World Mizrahi movement. He's also the father of Captain Daniel Peretz, who was killed on October 7th. Each of the two of them will serve 2.5 years out of the 5-year terms. I'm told that Rav Peretz will probably serve first, but that's subject to change. So some of this is kind of inside baseball stuff that most people don't really know or care so much about. What's interesting about this final decision right now is that both of those people, Chagowel, who is associated with Likud, and Rabbi Peretz, who's associated with Mizrahi, are both from the right-wing bloc. And that kind of represents a change from previous versions of an agreement that were discussed, which involved power sharing between the right and the left. So that's something that, that just came out, and I'll be speaking with people more about that over the course of the day. There are other positions that have yet to be announced, including the leadership of Kakal, the Keren Kayemet L'Yisrael. It'll be interesting to see if that also has been discussed to be a power sharing agreement between right and left wing parties, and it'll be interesting to see if that changes as well.
Zev, let me just jump in here for 1 second. We're talking for, the regular layman. We have these little blue boxes that have been, around for decades and decades. People are putting their money inside. And now we're at the point where these billions that have been collected are being distributed. And so it's actually extremely, relevant to the simple Jew to know what's happening on the upper echelons. And one of the weirder twists in this whole saga was, of course, when our prime minister's son, Yair Netanyahu, was kind of handpicked to have one of the plum jobs, which sparked a huge controversy, which actually made the World Jewish Congress, an actual 3-day event, meant to be a 3-day event. It was one of the days was canceled after this happened, also because it was occurring at the same time as the massive Haredi ultra-Orthodox demonstration in Jerusalem. So just talk a little bit about the, super, super inside baseball political aspect of it.
Right. What happened was on Wednesday night, 2 weeks ago, they were about to announce the decision of the leadership of these organizations. And then all of a sudden, it came out that Yair Netanyahu, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's controversial son, was quietly tapped for a cushy position on the executive of the WZO. This would have given him a huge salary, a car, and kind of a lot of influence, especially for somebody who's not particularly liked in the media for his frequent controversial statements. When that came out, people went crazy. And the compromise agreement that was, being discussed at that time was basically torn up, and all the negotiations about the leadership kind of went back to the drawing board. If it's okay, I'm going to jump to the next scandal that happened a couple of days later. They went back to discuss what, the leadership positions. And then all of a sudden, Yesh Atid leader Yair Lapid dropped a different bombshell that after he had played a key role in trying to negotiate an agreement between the right wing and the left wing about all these positions, he suddenly announced he's dropping out. He's sick of the corruption in this whole process, and instead of helping to, in the selection process, he's going to try to overhaul the WZO, and he stepped out completely. The way he said it, this was kind of, he's seen a lot of the behind-the-scenes deal-making and corruption that was leading this, and the way he said it, his integrity couldn't allow him to continue with this process. Whether or not it was all an issue of integrity or not, that was a bombshell because it left his left-wing partners on the bloc without their strongest ally in the negotiations, and that might be one of the reasons that, as I said earlier, two right-wing parties will split in the leadership of the WZO.
Okay, we are going to end here, and it's a big to be continued. So please watch the live blog and our site for more updates. Now, just to finish off, Zev, I want to turn to some reporting you did on Yad Vashem. And last week, Yad Vashem, which is Israel's World Holocaust Remembrance Center, they said that they had recovered the names of 5 million Jews murdered in the Holocaust. Of course, that's a milestone that it called historic, and that leaves 1 million Jews who are probably going to remain nameless for eternity. Of course, the organization is working to change that fact. And one of the ways that the organization is trying to mark each individual, each of the 6 million who were killed, is by drawing out some personal effects of some of those who went through the Holocaust, many of which were saved, thank God. And so, Zev, tell us a little bit about what you saw when you visited Yad Vashem last week.
Right. So last week I headed over to Yad Vashem to see their excellent new exhibition. One thing we've talked about in the past is how, especially as we cross 80 years since the end of World War II, many of the Holocaust survivors who've been giving over their eyewitness testimonies are no longer with us, or will soon no longer be with us. And there's a big challenge in the world of Holocaust remembrance to figure out how to keep things relevant for future generations. So Yad Vashem may be best known for its gigantic exhibitions about ghettos and concentration camps, but it also has a research center that has amassed millions of pages of documentation and tens of thousands of different kinds of artifacts gathered over the years, including personal artwork, photographs, personal items. Yad Vashem actually recently built a 5-story storage facility where it stores these artifacts in the best conditions possible. A lot of these have never been viewed by the public or have been accessible. So last week they launched this new exhibition for the first time, putting some of the most poignant items up for public display. Which is interesting because, number one, these things have never been seen. And the curator did an excellent job of creating an exhibition that highlights the personal challenges, the individual lives of people who have been lost. And instead of focusing on the trains and the concentration camps, tells, individual stories of people. And it's really a beautiful exhibition, the way it's done. I'll just share a couple of the items that were most moving for me. As you enter, there's a full wardrobe closet where a Jewish girl in her teens hid from the Nazis during a roundup in Poland in 1941. She was hiding inside of this closet, and a Nazi who had entered the home asked the owner of the building for the key to this closet so he could check whether someone was inside. The woman said that the key was lost and she couldn't open it. And so the officer, in frustration, instead stabbed his bayonet through the door, actually striking just above the girl's head. So what you can see, is this very powerful exhibit of the actual piece of furniture that was brought over from Poland to Yad Vashem. It's stored there now, and it's this old style wardrobe closet. And there's a hole. You can actually see the hole where the bayonet went through, and it's kind of very powerful to see that up close. A few other items are, there's a handwritten Rosh Hashanah Machzor prayer book written by memory from Cantor Naftali Stern using a pencil and paper that he purchased in the camps in exchange for a ration of bread. Other heartbreaking items, there's a picture book illustrated by a survivor illustrating the steps that her family would take to hide from the Nazis. There's also a mangled spoon, a spoon that's destroyed because it absorbed a bullet. This young man was jumping off a train to escape deportation, and he was shot, and this spoon saved his life. I'll just conclude with one of the most famous items. You can actually see an original list compiled by Oskar Schindler of some of the 1,100 Jewish prisoners he saved in the story, obviously immortalized by the movie Schindler's List. It's a really fascinating exhibit, and I definitely recommend, if you're in Jerusalem or you have the opportunity, to check it out.
Zev, thank you so much for bringing that to us and everything else, all your insights today.
Thank you, Amanda. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for listening to the Times of Israel's Daily Briefing. Please check out another installment tomorrow. This episode was produced by the Podwaves. If you have any questions or comments about this or any other episode, please drop us an email to podcast@thetimesofisrael.com. Until tomorrow. Shalom.